The screen fades in on a close-up of a delicate gold ring, its setting empty, glinting under harsh courtroom lights. My grandmother's voice echoes in my head. When you marry, Evie, fill this with a stone that shines brighter than any lie. I was 28 planning the wedding of my dreams when I opened the bank statement. 0. My wedding fund, a $135,000, scraped together from Grandma June's church trust. My overtime shifts every birthday check gone. Vanished. Mom's voicemail played on loop. Family first, sweetheart. Don't make waves. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. My sister Lily. She posted a new SUV on Instagram captioned blessed. I didn't scream. I smiled. I printed every receipt, every forged signature, every pawn ticket for Grandma's empty ring. I waited. In court, the judge's voice cut like ice misappropriation of trust assets. Gasps rippled through the pews. Mom collapsed to her knees, clutching Dad's trembling hand. Lily's smirk died. The judge ordered full repayment damages and a public apology on their knees in church. But that was just the beginning. I pulled Grandma's sealed envelope from my purse and slid it across the bench. The room froze. Whatever was inside would strip away their last defense and reveal a secret they buried deeper than the money. Stay until the end. 5 twists, 1 stone, and a reckoning that will leave you cheering. They thought they broke me. They have no idea what Grandma taught me about mercy with teeth. My name is Evelyn Marie Caldwell Evie, to everyone who matters. I'm 28, a pediatric nurse at St. Luke's Children's Hospital in Knoxville, Tennessee, and the only child of Frank and Marlene Caldwell who still shows up to Sunday service without being dragged. I was raised on sweet tea, front porch promises, and the ironclad belief that a Caldwell keeps her word even when it costs her everything. Grandma June made sure of that. The ring came to me on a Tuesday in early spring, the kind of day when the dogwoods were just starting to blush, and the air carried the faint promise of rain. Grandma June had asked me to drive her to the cemetery to visit Grandpa Harlan's grave. She was 83, frail as a sparrow, but her eyes still held the same steel that had stared down bankers and bishops alike. We sat on the little bench under the magnolia tree, her gnarled fingers wrapped around mine. In her palm lay a small velvet pouch the color of midnight. "Open it, child," she said, voice soft but steady. Inside was a gold ring, delicate and old-fashioned, the setting empty where a stone should sit. No diamond, no sapphire, nothing but a tiny circle of light waiting to be filled. I turned it over, confused. "It's your wedding ring, Evie," she explained. "Or it will be when the time comes. Harlan gave me the band the day he proposed. I wore it plain for a year while we saved for the stone. When you marry, you'll choose the gem yourself. But the promise, this ring starts now." I slipped it onto my right hand, the metal cool against my skin. "Why give it to me empty?" "Because a promise isn't the sparkle," she said. "It's the space you leave for truth to grow. Fill it only when you're ready to keep a vow bigger than yourself." I laughed, thinking she was being poetic. She wasn't. Grandma June never was. Back at the house, she led me to the mantel above the fireplace where a black and white photograph hung in a simple oak frame. It showed a younger June, maybe 35, standing on the front steps of First Baptist Arms, crossed chin high. Someone had written across the bottom in her neat schoolteacher script, "Keeping your word is keeping the house." I'd seen the picture 1,000 times, but that day she made me read the words aloud. "That was the day I sued the deacon board," she said, settling into her rocker with a cup of chamomile. "They wanted to sell the parsonage to a developer. I reminded them the land was deeded to the church in perpetuity. Took me 6 months and every dime in the building fund, but we kept the house. And we kept our souls." I must have looked impressed because she waved a hand. "Don't make me a Saint, Evie. I just hate liars." Pastor Ruth stopped by that afternoon with a casserole and a story I'd never heard. Seems Grandma June hadn't just won the lawsuit, she'd done it pro se, representing herself, because the church couldn't afford a lawyer. The judge, a young Caldwell cousin twice removed, had praised her clarity of purpose and command of the law. Ruth chuckled, patting June's knee. She cross-examined the chairman like he was testifying before the Almighty. Grandma June just smiled into her tea. Ruth exaggerates. I only asked the questions nobody else would. That night, I sat on the porch swing with the ring on my finger, turning it so the empty prongs caught the porch light. I was dating Daniel then, a quiet attorney with kind eyes and a laugh that made my stomach flip. We'd talked marriage in the vague, someday way young couples do. The ring felt like a dare and a benediction all at once. 2 weeks later, Grandma June was gone. A stroke in her sleep, peaceful as falling asleep in church. The funeral was standing room only. Pastor Ruth read from Proverbs. The heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, for the ears of the wise seek it out. Mom cried into Dad's shoulder. Lily, my younger sister, wore sunglasses indoors and checked her phone every 5 minutes. After the burial, the family gathered at the house. Mom pressed a thick envelope into my hands. From the trust, she said, eyes red-rimmed. Grandma wanted you to have it for your wedding. She was specific. I didn't open it then. I was too busy greeting cousins and accepting casseroles. But that night alone in my childhood bedroom, I slit the seal. Inside was a single sheet, a bank statement for the June Caldwell Wedding Fund established when I was 5. Balance $135,000. Enough for the dress, the venue, the honeymoon to the Smokies Daniel and I had circled on a map. Enough to start a life. I called Mom the next morning, voice shaking with gratitude. I can't believe she saved all this. Mom hesitated. She wanted you happy, honey, that's all. Something in her tone snagged. Mom, have you seen the account recently? Silence. Then it's complicated, Evie. Family first. I drove to the bank that afternoon. The teller, a girl I'd gone to high school with, pulled up the records. Her face went pale. I'm sorry, Miss Caldwell. The balance is 0. Last withdrawal was 3 months ago. Cashier's check to an IVF clinic in Nashville. My knees buckled. I gripped the counter. Who authorized it? She turned the screen. 2 signatures. Mom's and Lily's. That night I confronted Mom in the kitchen. She was washing dishes, sleeves rolled high, the ring I'd returned to her for safekeeping glinting on her right hand, my ring, the empty one. I laid the bank printout on the counter. Explain. She didn't turn around. Water ran over her hands. Lily needed help. The clinic was her last chance. Help you drained my future for her fertility treatments. Mom dried her hands, slow, deliberate. She faced me, eyes wet but steady. You're young. You'll earn more. Lily, she's running out of time. I held up my bare finger. Grandma gave me that ring. She gave me the fund. You had no right. Mom's gaze dropped to the empty setting. For a moment, I thought she'd apologize. Instead, she whispered, You won't need it anymore. The words landed like a slap. I stared at her, this woman who'd braided my hair and packed my lunches, and felt the ground shift beneath me. The ring on her finger wasn't just gold. It was a vow. And she'd broken it. I left without another word. In the car, I called Daniel. I need a lawyer, I said, and I need receipts. The night I asked Mom about the check, she stared at the empty ring and whispered, You won't need it anymore. I drove home with the bank printout folded in my purse like a death notice, the numbers zeroed out in black and white. My apartment felt smaller that night, the walls pressing in as I sat at the kitchen table under a single lamp. The silence was thick enough to choke on. I pulled out Grandma June's ring box from the drawer where I'd stored it after the funeral, opened it, and stared at the empty setting. It looked accusing now, a tiny mouth waiting for an answer I didn't have. I slipped it onto my finger again just to feel something solid, and that's when I noticed the bank book tucked beneath the velvet liner. Grandma had always kept duplicates of everything. I'd forgotten it was there. The leather cover was cracked, the pages yellowed, but the entries were in her meticulous hand until the last year when Mom's looping cursive took over. I flipped to the final page and my breath caught. A withdrawal slip was paper-clipped to the ledger, handwritten in blue ink that had bled slightly at the edges. The amount matched the clinic transfer, exactly $135,000. The signature line held 2 names, but the second one was smudged as if someone had pressed too hard and then tried to erase the evidence. I held it to the light. The pressure marks were deep, frantic. Whoever signed second had been shaking, My phone buzzed on the table. A voicemail notification. I'd missed it earlier in the chaos. I pressed play and Mom's voice filled the room thin and strained. "Evie, honey, please don't dig into this. Family first always. Some things are bigger than money. Call me when you calm down." The message ended with a click, but the words hung in the air like smoke. Bigger than money. Bigger than the promise Grandma June had spent 40 years building penny by penny for me. I saved the voicemail date, stamped it, and emailed a copy to myself. Evidence Daniel had said, "Start collecting." Sleep wouldn't come. I brewed chamomile the way Grandma taught me, 2 bags, a teaspoon of honey, but it tasted like ash. At 2:17 a.m., I opened my laptop and started a document titled Timeline. I typed the date of the withdrawal, the clinic name, the smudged signature. Then I added the voicemail transcript. My hands trembled, but the nurse in me took over, clinical, methodical. I printed the bankbook pages, the withdrawal slip, the clinic confirmation I'd requested online using Grandma's old account number. The printer whirred like a heartbeat. Morning came gray and humid. I called in sick to the hospital, something I'd never done, and drove to the bank at opening. The same teller from yesterday, Sarah Grace, met me in the lobby. Her eyes flicked to the ring on my finger, then to the folder in my hand. "Can we talk privately?" I asked. She led me to a small office with frosted glass. I laid the withdrawal slip on the desk. This signature, the smudged one. "Can you tell me whose it is?" Sarah hesitated, then pulled up the account on her computer. "It's supposed to be co-signed by the successor trustee. That would be your mother, Mrs. Caldwell. But the second signature doesn't match any on file. It's close, but the loops are wrong." She zoomed in on the screen. "See the L in Caldwell. Too much pressure. Someone was trying to copy, not sign." My stomach twisted. "Can you print the signature card for me?" She did, and there it was, Mom's signature from 10 years ago, smooth and confident. The smudged one on the withdrawal slip was a forgery, a clumsy imitation. I folded the printout carefully. "One more thing. Was this transaction flagged at all?" Sarah bit her lip. "The amount triggered a review, but your mom came in person with Lily. Said it was an emergency medical procedure. The manager approved it because of the family connection." She lowered her voice. "Between us, he's new. Didn't know Mrs. June's rules about dual signatures for anything over 10,000. I thanked her and left with a manila envelope stuffed with copies. Outside, the sun was climbing, but the air felt cold. I sat in my car and stared at the envelope. Dual signatures. Grandma's rule. Mom had broken it, and someone had helped her fake the second name. That afternoon, I stopped at Mrs. Hargrove's house on Maple Street. She's 81, sharp as ever, and the neighborhood's unofficial historian. She greeted me at the door with a plate of apple pie still warm from the oven. "Evie Caldwell, you look like you've seen a ghost. Come in, child." I sat at her kitchen table, the same one where I'd eaten cookies after school. She poured sweet tea without asking. I told her about the fund, the withdrawal, the smudged signature. Her eyes narrowed. "Your mama always was proud," she said. "Proud people do foolish things to keep up appearances." She disappeared into the pantry and returned with a small notepad. On the top sheet in her spidery handwriting was a note. "Silence is complicity, dear. Speak truth even when it hurts." She tore it off and pressed it into my hand. "I left this on your parents' porch this morning. Figured someone needed to say it." I stared at the words. You knew, not the details. "But I saw Lily driving that shiny new SUV last week. Your daddy's truck is 10 years old and held together with duct tape. Didn't add up." She patted my hand. "June would have marched into that bank herself. You've got her spine, Evie. Use it." I left with the pie and the note, the scent of cinnamon clinging to my clothes. On the drive home, my phone lit up with a notification. Lily had posted on Instagram a photo of her standing beside the SUV, sunglasses reflecting the camera flash caption, "Blessed and stressed, but God provides. 135K is just the beginning." The post had 37 likes already, including Mom's account. I pulled over on a quiet side street and stared at the screen. Just the beginning. The words burned. I screenshot it, saved it, emailed it to myself. Then I opened a new document and titled it Public Statements. Lily had just handed me a confession in glittery font. That night I spread everything across my coffee table. The bank book, the withdrawal slip, the signature card, the voicemail transcript. Mrs. Hargrove's note, Lily's post. I arranged them like puzzle pieces. The smudged signature bothered me most. If Mom had forged it, whose name was, she trying to imitate Grandma June, was gone. The only other trustee had been Pastor Ruth, and her signature was on file, elegant and unmistakable. I pulled up the church directory on my laptop and found Ruth's old authorization form from when she'd co-signed a youth mission trip. The loops were identical to the smudged mark, but the pressure was wrong. Someone had traced Ruth's signature poorly. I called Daniel at 10:30. He answered on the second ring, voice thick with sleep. Evie, are you okay? I have proof, I said. Forged signature, voicemail, social media post. It's attempted fraud. He was quiet for a moment. Bring everything to my office tomorrow. We'll file a temporary restraining order on the account first thing. No more withdrawals. I hung up and looked at the ring again. The empty setting caught the lamplight, throwing tiny prisms on the wall. Grandma June's voice whispered in my memory. Keeping your word is keeping the house. I closed the box and slipped it into my purse beside the envelope of evidence. Tomorrow the fight would begin in earnest. But tonight the house felt colder than ever. I locked the door, set the alarm, and sat in the dark with the pie Mrs. Hargrove had given me. I didn't eat a bite. Lily posts publicly 135K is just the beginning. I woke before the alarm, the ring box still on the nightstand where I'd left it, the faint scent of Mrs. Hargrove's apple pie lingering like a ghost. Daniel's office opened at 8, but I was there by 7:45, clutching a thermos of coffee and the manila envelope that now felt heavier than my nursing bag after a double shift. He met me in the lobby, tie already knotted, eyes sharp, despite the early hour. Let's see what you've got, he said, leading me to a small conference room with frosted windows and a table scarred from years of legal battles. I spread the documents in neat rows. Bank book, withdrawal slip, signature card, voicemail transcript, Mrs. Hargrove's note, Lily's screenshot. Daniel listened without interrupting, his pen moving in quick, precise strokes. When I finished, he leaned back and exhaled. This is solid for a restraining order, but we need the original contract that authorized the withdrawal. The clinic won't release it without a subpoena, and we're not there yet. He tapped the smudged signature. We start with what we can verify independently. Who handled the account before the new manager? Mr. Whitaker, I said. He retired last year. Lives over on Dogwood Lane. Daniel nodded. Road trip. We found Mr. Whitaker watering roses in his front yard, suspenders clipped to khakis, a straw hat shading his weathered face. He recognized me immediately. Evie Caldwell, June's girl. Heard about your grandmother. Fine woman. He set the hose down and wiped his hands on a rag. What brings you here? I handed him the withdrawal slip. His eyes narrowed behind bifocals. This shouldn't have happened. Mrs. June was explicit. Any withdrawal over $10,000 required 2 trustee signatures, one of them hers or her designated successor. After she passed, that duty fell to you and your mother jointly. He shook his head. I trained the new fellow myself. He must have missed the file note. Daniel spoke up. Can you confirm the dual signature rule in writing? Whitaker disappeared inside and returned with a faded folder. Inside was a yellowed memo dated 2008. Grandma June's signature bold at the bottom. Dual signatures mandatory for sums exceeding $10,000 to protect beneficiary intent. He photocopied it on an ancient machine in his study, the paper warm when he handed it over. She fought for that rule after a deacon tried to divert mission funds. Said trust without teeth was just a suggestion. Back in the car, Daniel added the memo to our stack. Next stop, the clinic. They'll stonewall us, but we can at least get the intake form. The Nashville Fertility Center was a sleek building with valet parking and a fountain in the lobby. The receptionist, a young woman with a name tag reading, Brittany, smiled too brightly. Do you have an appointment? Daniel slid his card across the counter. We're here about a payment made in March from the June Caldwell Trust. We need the intake paperwork. Brittany's smile faltered. Patient privacy laws don't apply to financial sponsors, Daniel finished. The trust is the payer. We represent the trustee. She disappeared behind a door. 10 minutes later, a manager emerged, clipboard in hand. I can't release medical records, but I can give you the billing contract. She handed over a thin packet. Redacted for privacy, of course. I flipped through those pages in the parking lot. The contract listed Lily as the patient, the procedure as IVF with donor eggs. The total cost matched the withdrawal exactly. The line marked financial sponsor was blank, but at the bottom, beneath the signature block, was a faint smudge. I held it to the sunlight. Nothing. Then I remembered the UV flashlight I kept in my glove box for checking pupil reactions during night shifts. I clicked it on and aimed it at the page. There, glowing like a secret, was a thumbprint. Not Lily's, not Mom's. The ridges were distinct, the loop pattern unmistakable. I'd seen it 100 times on birthday cards and church bulletins. Grandma June's thumbprint pressed in invisible ink or residue from the clinic's stamp pad. She must have touched the form during a visit, maybe to sign something else, maybe just to steady the paper. But it was there, a ghost in the contract, tying her to the transaction she never authorized. Daniel whistled low. That's admissible. Latent print on a financial document. We'll need an expert, but it's a start. That evening, I sat at my desk with Lily's Instagram pulled up on my laptop. Her latest post was a mirror selfie in a boutique dressing room, the SUV visible through the glass behind her. I zoomed in on the reflection. There on the passenger seat was a rental agreement folder, the logo of Elite Luxury Autos peeking out. I enhanced the image pixel by pixel until the fine print became legible. The contract was in Dad's name, dated 2 days after the clinic withdrawal. The monthly payment was $1,200 more than his truck note, more than he could afford on a mechanic's salary. I printed the enhanced photo, the rental logo circled in red. Another piece. Dad wasn't just complicit. He was spending the spoils. The next morning, I met Maya Daniels' paralegal at the courthouse to file the restraining order. She was in her 60s, hair pulled back in a neat bun, glasses perched on her nose. "You're doing this right," she said, stamping forms. "No drama, just facts. Juries love facts." She handed me a checklist: asset, freeze, discovery, demand, deposition notices. "We'll start with the bank, then the clinic, then your parents." Slow and steady. I nodded, but my mind was on the thumbprint. I stopped at a forensics supply store on the way home and bought a small UV lamp and fingerprint powder. Back in my apartment, I dusted the contract under the light. The print lifted clean, a perfect match to the one on Grandma June's old driver's license I'd found in her wallet after the funeral. I sealed it in an evidence bag, labeled it, and added it to the growing file. Daniel called that afternoon. The bank complied with the freeze. No activity since yesterday. But I pulled the trust document from probate. There's a reversion clause. If the fund is misused, it reverts to the original beneficiary, you, with penalties. Your parents signed the acknowledgement page, but there's a notation in the margin. Looks like they initialed over the clause as if they were trying to obscure it. I closed my eyes. They knew. Worse, he said. They tried to hide it. That's intent. I hung up and opened the trust file on my laptop. The reversion clause was there, bolded and underlined in Grandma June's red pen. Upon evidence of misappropriation, all assets revert to primary beneficiary with interest and damages. Below it, Mom and Dad's signatures, the ink slightly smeared where they'd tried to write over the warning. The lawyer points to fine print reversion clause activated. Mom and Dad signed over it. I stood in Daniel's office the next morning, the trust document spread across the conference table like a map of betrayal. The reversion clause circled in red where Mom and Dad had tried to scribble it away. Maya arrived with a legal pad and a thermos of strong coffee, her reading glasses perched low on her nose. She was the kind of woman who could explain probate to a Sunday school class without losing a soul, and today she had her teacher voice on. "Sit down, Evie," she said, patting the chair beside her. We're going to make this as plain as the Ten Commandments. Daniel leaned against the window, arms crossed, letting Maya take the lead. She tapped the clause with her pen. First thing you need to understand is fiduciary duty. That's a fancy term for the sacred trust your parents accepted when they became trustees of Grandma June's fund. Think of it like the church building fund. Every widow's mite, every bake sale dollar goes into a locked box for the new roof. The treasurer doesn't get to dip in for a new dishwasher just because her kitchen's old. That money has a purpose, and the treasurer has a duty to guard it with her life. I nodded, remembering the glass jar on the communion table labeled, "Roof repair, do not touch." Maya continued, "Misappropriation is when the treasurer takes that money anyway. Doesn't matter if she spends it on her child's braces or a mission trip to Guatemala. It's still theft because it wasn't hers to give. The law calls it conversion of trust property, but in church terms it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, and Peter gets mighty angry." She slid a yellow legal pad toward me and drew a simple square. "Imagine this is the safe in the church office. Grandma June handed your parents the key and said, 'This is for Evie's wedding. Guard it.' Borrowing the key to open the safe and take the cash isn't borrowing the money, it's stealing it. Even if they planned to pay it back, even if they left an IOU. The safe wasn't theirs, and neither was the money." Daniel spoke up, then his voice calm but firm. "We're not here to put your parents in jail, Evie. That's not what Grandma June would want, and it's not what you want either. What we're after is accountability and transparency. They need to show every penny, explain every decision, and make it right. Full restitution plus interest plus whatever damages the court deems fair. And they need to do it publicly so the community sees that trust matters." Maya nodded. "The reversion clause is your ace. It says if the fund is misused, everything snaps back to you automatically like a rubber band. The court doesn't have to decide guilt. The clause does it for them. Your parents acknowledged it when they signed the trust amendment, even if they tried to scribble over the warning. That's called spoliation, tampering with evidence, and judges hate it." She drew a second box on the pad, this one with a spring inside. Picture the money as a coiled spring. They stretched it out of shape, but the clause is the mechanism that snaps it back. And when it snaps, it might take some of their own assets with it, anything traceable to the misappropriated funds. I traced the spring with my finger. So the SUV, the rental payments, could be clawed back. Daniel finished. If we prove the payments came from the trust, the court can order them sold to satisfy the judgment. Same with any improvements to the house. Any vacations, anything that smells like trust money. Maya leaned in, her voice softening. "This isn't about punishment, Evie. It's about restoration. Grandma June built that fund with love and sacrifice. Your parents broke the circle. We're asking the court to mend it, not burn the house down." I thought of Mrs. Hargrove's note. Silence is complicity. Staying quiet would make me part of the lie. Speaking up would tear the family apart. But the ring on my finger, the empty setting, reminded me that some promises are bigger than family peace. Daniel slid a draft complaint across the table. "We file this morning. It's straightforward breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation, demand for accounting, activation of reversion. No criminal charges, no media circus. Just the facts laid out like a Sunday sermon." I signed where he indicated my hand, steady for the first time in days. Maya gathered the pages, stapled them with a satisfying snap. "The clerk's office opens in 20 minutes. I'll walk it over myself." We stood in the lobby as she left, the morning sun slanting through the glass doors. Daniel touched my elbow. "You okay?" I nodded. "I keep thinking about the church safe. If someone took the roof fund, the whole congregation would demand answers. Why should my wedding be any different?" He smiled, the first real one I'd seen from him all week. "That's the spirit. Justice isn't vengeance, it's balance." The response came faster than we expected. By 4 o'clock, a courier delivered a thick envelope to Daniel's office. The return address was the county courthouse, but the seal was the district attorney's office embossed in red wax. Daniel slid it open with a letter opener, his face tightening as he read. "It's a motion to dismiss," he said, spreading the pages. "They're claiming the withdrawal was an emergency family expense authorized under a vague health and welfare clause, your parents say. Grandma June added verbally. They've attached affidavits from 3 church members who swear they heard her say the fund could be used as needed for family. Maya scanned the signatures. 2 of those ladies weren't even at the meeting where the trust was discussed. And the 3rd is your mom's bridge partner. Daniel turned to the last page. They want a hearing next week. And they've requested mediation first private no record. I stared at the DA's seal. Dad had gone to high school with the current district attorney, played football together, stood up in each other's weddings. The seal felt like a wink a boys' club handshake across the years. Daniel folded the motion carefully. This changes things. They're lawyering up and they're using connections. We need to be ready for a fight. I picked up the envelope, the wax seal cracking under my fingers. The paper inside smelled like courthouse dust and old favors. Parents' response letter bears the county DA's seal, Dad's old friend. The red wax seal crumbled in my hand like dried blood, and the scent of courthouse dust clung to my fingers long after I set the envelope down. Daniel locked the motion in his safe, his jaw tight, but Maya just adjusted her glasses and said, "They want mediation." Fine. We'll give them mediation, but on our terms, not theirs. She turned to me with the calm authority of a woman who has buried a husband and raised 3 boys on a paralegal's salary. First rule. Evie, no social media. Not one word, not one emoji. The congregation gossips enough without our help. Let the facts speak in court, not on Facebook. I nodded, already deleting the apps from my phone. The silence felt strange, like stepping into a library after a rock concert. But it was a relief, too. No more scrolling past Lily's filtered selfies or Mom's Bible verses that now read like accusations. Maya handed me a box of creamy stationery and a fountain pen. Write to the people who loved June. Tell them you're seeking justice, not revenge. Handwritten letters carry weight. They'll be read at kitchen tables, not skimmed on screens. That night, I sat at Grandma's old roll-top desk, the one she'd refinished herself after Grandpa died, and began. Dear Mrs. Abernathy. I wrote to the organist who'd taught me scales when I was 6. Grandma June's trust was her final act of love for our family. I'm asking the court to honor that love by making things right. I told the truth without venom, the money was gone. The signatures questioned the reversion clause invoked. I asked for prayers, not pitchforks. By midnight, I had 20 envelopes addressed stamps aligned like soldiers. I drove to the post office at dawn and mailed them before I could second-guess a single word. Pastor Ruth called while I was still in the parking lot. Coffee at the parsonage, 30 minutes. Her voice left no room for refusal. I found her in the sunlit kitchen apron dusted with flour, kneading biscuit dough with the same hands that had baptized me. She didn't speak until the biscuits were in the oven, and 2 mugs of chicory coffee steamed between us. Then she fixed me with eyes that had seen too many hospital rooms and funeral parlors. I lost Evelyn Mercer over money, she said, using her full name the way only old friends do. We were thicker than sisters. When her boy got into drugs, she borrowed from the youth camp fund just a little, she said, to get him into rehab. I confronted her in love. She called me self-righteous. We never spoke again. She died last year, still owing the church $1,200. Ruth's hands stilled on the table. I regret the silence more than the loan. Boundaries aren't walls, Evie. They're doors we choose to open or close. You're opening one now. It's going to hurt, but it's the only way to keep the house standing. I swallowed hard. I don't want to destroy them. You're not. You're asking them to face what they broke. That's mercy, not meanness. She reached across and squeezed my wrist. June would be proud. She soothed the deacons and still brought them casseroles. Steel spine, velvet heart. Her words settled in my chest like a warm stone. I left with a Tupperware of biscuits and a resolve I hadn't felt since nursing school finals. On the drive home, I called Daniel. We need a handwriting expert. Someone the jury will trust on sight. He didn't hesitate. Mrs. Eleanor Grayson, 68, widowed, taught penmanship at the high school for 30 years. Her husband was a sheriff's deputy, killed in the line of duty. She's testified in 3 forgery cases, all for the prosecution. Juries eat out of her hand. I met Mrs. Grayson the next afternoon in the public library's local history room, surrounded by glass cases of Civil War letters and yellowed marriage licenses. She wore a navy cardigan despite the heat, her silver hair pinned in a neat bun, and carried a leather satchel that looked older than I was. I laid the withdrawal slip, the signature card, and the trust acknowledgement on the table between us. She adjusted a pair of half-moon spectacles and opened a velvet-lined case containing a jeweler's loupe, a light box, and a row of ink vials like a painter's palette. She worked in silence, the only sound the soft click of her loupe and the occasional scratch of a mechanical pencil. After 20 minutes, she looked up, eyes bright. The smudged signature is a traced forgery, but not of your mother's hand. See the tremor in the crossbar of the T. That's hesitation, not habit. The forger practiced on a separate sheet first, then pressed too hard, transferring the image. She slid a transparency overlay across the withdrawal slip. The original strokes match the loops on this rental agreement. You brought the one from your father's name on the SUV contract. Same pen pressure, same ink bleed. Whoever traced the second signature used the same ballpoint. My pulse quickened. Can you prove it? She smiled, the kind of smile that said she'd been waiting for this question since 1982. I can do better. Bring me a sample from your father's office, something routine, a work order, a parts invoice. Ink degrades predictably. If the chemical composition matches, we have a smoking gun. I drove straight to Dad's garage, the one he'd run since I was in diapers, now tucked behind the house because the bank had foreclosed on the commercial lot. The bay doors were open, country music drifting out with the smell of motor oil and WD-40. Dad was under a pickup, only his boots visible. I slipped inside, heart hammering, and lifted a carbon copy work order from the cluttered desk. The pen clipped to it was a cheap Bic, the same blue as the smudged signature. I tucked the paper into a plastic sleeve and left before he rolled out. Mrs. Grayson met me an hour later in the library parking lot. I handed her the work order. She didn't open it, just slipped it into her satchel. I'll need 24 hours. The lab at the community college owes me a favor. She paused, studying my face. You look like June when she was determined. Same jaw set. Don't let them make you doubt your own eyes. That night, I dreamed of boundaries, of doors swinging open onto dark rooms where secrets scuttled like roaches. I woke with the taste of metal in my mouth and the certainty that the next revelation would come from the ink itself. The following afternoon, Mrs. Grayson called. Meet me at the library. Bring Daniel. We gathered around the same table now, covered with enlargements and spectral analysis charts. She adjusted her loupe and pointed to a magnified image of the smudged signature beside the work order. The ink is identical down to the polymer binders. Manufactured in the same batch, used within weeks of each other. But look here. She indicated a microscopic flaw in the ballpoint tip, a tiny burr that left a signature scratch on every document. Your father's office pen. No question. Daniel exhaled slowly. That ties the forgery to the garage to Dad. Mrs. Grayson nodded, and the hesitation marks show whoever traced it was under duress. Guilt leaves a fingerprint too. I stared at the images, the burr mark repeated like a heartbeat. Dad's pen. Dad's hand. Dad's choice to cover for Mom or for Lily, or for the illusion that everything was fine. The expert peers through her loupe. This ink. It's the pen from your father's office. The mediation room was a beige box in the county annex, fluorescent lights humming like trapped flies, the kind of place where marriages dissolve and custody battles begin. Mrs. Grayson's report lay in my lap, the burr mark on the ink enlarged to the size of a fingerprint, proof that Dad's own pen had signed away my future. Daniel sat to my left, tie loosened just enough to signal we weren't here to play nice. Across the table, Mom and Dad flanked their attorney, a slick man in a navy suit, who'd introduced himself as just here to facilitate healing. Lily perched at the end, legs crossed, manicure tapping the wood like a metronome, counting down to disaster. The mediator, Ms. Delgado, was a calm woman in her 50s with a voice like warm honey and eyes that missed nothing. She started with ground rules. Everything said here is confidential. No recordings, no leaks. We're aiming for resolution, not retribution. I'll ask each side to sign a privacy pledge. She slid cream-colored forms across the table. I signed without hesitation. Mom's pen hovered, then scratched her name with a flourish. Dad followed. Lily rolled her eyes but complied. Ms. Delgado nodded. Good. Let's begin with the plaintiffs. Evie, in your own words, what do you need to feel whole? I kept it simple. The money returned with interest, an accounting of every dollar, and an acknowledgement that the trust was violated. Daniel laid the repayment schedule beside me, 24 neat lines showing monthly payments of $5,625 the SUV sold to cover the down payment the house refinanced if necessary. It wasn't punishment. It was math. Mom spoke first, voice trembling with rehearsed hurt. Evie, I'm sorry you're upset, but you're tearing this family apart over money. Lily needed medical help. You're healthy, established. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive? She dabbed her eyes with a tissue. All I ask is that you apologize for the pain you've caused me for dragging us through this public shame. The word public landed like a slap. I hadn't spoken to a soul outside Daniel's office and Pastor Ruth. Mom was the one who'd cried to her bridge club, who'd let Lily post victory laps online. I opened my mouth, but Daniel's hand brushed my knee under the table. Steady. Lily leaned forward, voice syrupy. Sis, I get it. You're mad. But IVF isn't cheap and the clinic had a cancellation fee. I paid for the egg donation myself out of pocket. It was a short-term loan to myself, basically. She smiled, all teeth. I'm good for it. Eventually. Daniel slid Mrs. Grayson's report across the table. The clinic invoice says donor eggs were included in the $135,000. No separate payment. And the SUV rental began 2 days later. Hard to call that eventually. He tapped the repayment plan. 24 months secured by the vehicle and a lien on the house. No excuses, no extensions. Sign and we walk away from court. Lily snorted. 24 months, I'm not a bank. And that car is my lifeline. How am I supposed to get to appointments? She flicked the paper back. Pass. Mom's tears dried instantly. See, she's unreasonable. After everything we've done for her. Dad finally spoke, voice gravelly. Evie, your mother and I are prepared to sell the boat, maybe take a second on the house. But not the car. Lily needs it. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Ms. Delgado tried again. Let's find middle ground. Perhaps a lump sum from the sale of non-essential assets, then a longer repayment. Daniel shook his head. The trust demands immediate reversion. Every day they keep the money interest accrues. We're already being generous. The room crackled. Lily scrolled her phone under the table, thumbs flying. Mom clutched Dad's arm like a life raft. I felt the weight of every letter I'd mailed, every prayer whispered in pews across town. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about whether a promise could outlive the people who broke it. Ms. Delgado sighed. I'm sensing impasse. Shall we take a 10-minute break? We filed into the hallway. I leaned against the cinder block wall, the cold seeping through my blouse. Daniel murmured, They're stalling. The DA's office can't shield them forever. Mom and Dad huddled with their lawyer voices low. Lily stepped out for a smoke phone to her ear, laughing about drama queens. When we reconvened, Ms. Delgado tried one last olive branch. A joint statement to the church, perhaps. An apology from both sides. A commitment to family counseling. Mom straightened. I'll apologize for any misunderstanding, but only if Evie apologizes first for hurting me, for making me the villain in front of God and everybody. I stared at her. The woman who'd taught me to say grace before meals, who'd driven me to every piano recital, now wanted me to kneel for the crime of asking for what was mine. The mediator's pen hovered over her notepad, waiting. Daniel closed his folder. No deal. We'll see you in court. Mom's face crumpled, but her eyes flashed fury. She leaned across the table, voice a hiss meant only for me. Take it to the end, then. You're no longer my daughter. The words sliced clean, no anesthesia. Dad flinched but said nothing. Lily smirked, already typing. Ms. Delgado ended the session with a quiet, I'm sorry we couldn't find common ground. Chairs scraped. Papers rustled. I stood last the repayment plan untouched. Mrs. Grayson's report clenched in my fist. In the hallway, Mom brushed past me without a glance, Dad trailing like a shadow. Lily's laughter echoed from the parking lot. Daniel touched my elbow. "You okay?" I wasn't, but I would be. The ring on my finger felt heavier, the empty setting a reminder that some voids can only be filled with truth. Mom whispers, "Take it to the end. You're no longer my daughter." The courthouse hallway smelled of floor wax and old coffee, and Mom's whisper still rang in my ears as Daniel steered me toward the elevator. I kept my eyes on the marble floor, counting the cracks so I wouldn't have to see the pity on the security guard's face. Outside, the August sun beat down like judgment, and I let the heat soak through my blouse while Daniel unlocked the car. Neither of us spoke until we were on the interstate, the mediation building shrinking in the rearview mirror. 7 days, he said, merging into traffic. Judge set the first hearing for next Friday. Discovery starts tomorrow. I knotted the ring, turning on my finger like a loose tooth. 7 days to live with the echo of, "You're no longer my daughter," and the certainty that every neighbor would know by supper. The week compressed into a single held breath. Mornings began with Daniel's emails, bank subpoenas returned, clinic records redacted, but incoming Mrs. Grayson's full report notarized. Afternoons were spent in the law library, cross-referencing statutes until the words blurred. Nights I walked the hospital corridors on volunteer shifts, changing IV bags, and soothing fevered children, because the routine kept the panic at bay. I avoided the house on Maple Street, avoided the garage, avoided Lily's Instagram stories that now featured sunsets and captions about toxic people. I slept in snatches the ring box on the nightstand like a loaded gun. Tuesday brought the first physical evidence from the court. A courier in a brown uniform knocked at Daniel's office just as I arrived with 2 large coffees. The envelope was thick manila sealed with red wax and stamped, "Property of probate court, do not open." Daniel turned it over, frowning. This came from June's estate file. The clerk said it was flagged for delivery only after litigation commenced. He handed it to me. "Your call, Evie. We can open it now or wait for the hearing." I felt the weight of the wax, the raised seal of the county. Grandma June had planned for this moment, whatever this was. Opening it outside the courtroom felt like cheating at solitaire. "Leave it sealed," I said. "Let the judge break it." That's the process she trusted. Daniel slipped it into an evidence sleeve and locked it in the safe beside Mrs. Grayson's ink analysis. I stared at the safe door long after it clicked shut, wondering what words waited inside. Wednesday. I drove to the storage unit where Mom had boxed Grandma's belongings after the funeral. The air was stale, scented with mothballs and cedar. I found the family Bible on the top shelf, its leather cover cracked, the gold lettering faded to ghost. I carried it to the single bulb overhead and let it fall open. Tucked between Psalms and Proverbs was a postcard, the kind with a glossy courthouse photo on the front. The back was written in a young man's impatient scrawl. "Mrs. Caldwell, your Law and Mercy class should be required for every judge. Thank you for teaching that justice without compassion is just noise. Respectfully, those Caldwell Jr." The postmark was 1987. Judge Caldwell, now silver-haired and presiding over my case, had once sat at Grandma's knee, learning the balance I was now fighting to restore. I slid the postcard into a plastic sleeve and added it to the growing file. A reminder that the bench wasn't neutral. It was human. Thursday. Daniel called me to the office after hours. The overhead lights were off, only his desk lamp glowing. On the blotter sat a small plastic cassette tape, the kind we used for mixtapes in middle school. The label was in Grandma June's handwriting, faded but legible. "Don't let love become cover-up." Daniel held up a yellowed envelope beside it. Found this in the trust's safety deposit box when the bank finally complied. The key was taped inside the original will. June left instructions to deliver it only if the fund was contested. I took the cassette, the plastic cool and familiar. She recorded something. "Looks like." The bank manager said she came in alone 6 months before she passed, asked for privacy, used the conference room for 20 minutes. Whatever she said, she wanted it preserved. He gestured to an ancient boombox on the credenza. We can listen now, or wait for court. I hesitated. Hearing her voice outside the sterile order of a courtroom felt like trespassing. Seal it with the envelope, I said. Let the jury hear it the same way they'll hear everything else. Daniel labeled the cassette, slid it into an evidence bag, and locked it beside the manila envelope. 2 secrets now side by side waiting for their moment. Friday. I received my first letter back from the congregation. Mrs. Abernathy, the organist, had written in trembling cursive on lilac stationery. Your grandmother once told me a promise is a seed. Water it with truth or it withers. Praying for you, child. I pinned it above my desk beside the postcard from Judge Caldwell. More letters trickled in, some offering casseroles, some Bible verses, one from the youth pastor promising to testify about Grandma's integrity. I answered each by hand, thanking them for their courage. The mailbox became a small battlefield of ink and hope. Saturday. I walked the hospital garden during my break, the ring catching sunlight on every turn. A text from Daniel. Parents' attorney filed a motion to exclude the cassette claims undue prejudice. Hearing Monday. I typed back a single thumbs up, then deleted it. No emojis, Maya had warned. I settled for acknowledged. Sunday, I skipped church. The thought of facing Mom in the pew beside me, Dad's hand on her knee, Lily's perfume clouding the aisle was more than I could bear. Instead, I sat in my apartment with the sealed envelope on the coffee table, the cassette beside it like a tiny coffin. I traced the wax seal, feeling the raised ridges of the county emblem. Whatever was inside would either heal us or finish us. I left it unopened, a discipline harder than any fasting I'd ever attempted. Monday morning. Daniel picked me up at dawn. The courthouse loomed gray against a pink sky. We carried the evidence boxes ourselves, refusing the offer of a deputy. In the conference room, we laid out the final exhibits: the bank book, the withdrawal slip, Mrs. Grayson's enlargements, the postcard, the cassette, the manila envelope still sealed. Daniel checked his watch. Judge wants us in chambers at 9. We'll argue admissibility then. I slipped the envelope into my purse beside the ring box, the weight of both pulling at my shoulder. The hallway outside was quiet, only the echo of our footsteps. I paused at the water fountain, letting the cold stream steady my hands. Whatever Grandma had sealed away, whatever warning she'd recorded, would speak for itself in the light of day. I had done my part. Gathered, waited, refused to flinch. I slipped the envelope into my purse and vow. If it hurts, let truth witness. The courthouse steps were slick with morning dew as Daniel and I climbed them. The sealed envelope in my purse pressing against my hip like a second heartbeat. Inside the oak-paneled courtroom, the air was thick with the scent of lemon polish and nervous sweat. The gallery filled slowly, familiar faces from Sunday services and hospital corridors, sliding into pews with the hushed reverence of a funeral. Pastor Ruth sat front row center, her Bible closed on her lap. Miss Hargrove arrived with a thermos and a determined nod. Even Mr. Whitaker, the retired bank treasurer, took a seat near the aisle, his straw hat balanced on his knee. Judge Caldwell entered at 9 sharp black robes sweeping the floor, and the bailiff's call for order silenced the rustle of programs. Mom and Dad sat at the defense table, shoulders touching their attorney between them like a referee. Lily was absent, excused for medical reasons, though I suspected she simply couldn't face the room. Daniel and I took our places opposite Maya, behind us with a legal pad and a quiet smile. The judge adjusted his glasses and began. Case 24 CV, 1972. Caldwell versus Caldwell. We are here on plaintiff's motion for summary judgment on the issue of misappropriation of trust assets. Counsel proceed. Daniel Rowe's voice steady. Your Honor, the evidence will show a clear breach of fiduciary duty. We begin with the handwriting analysis. He gestured to Mrs. Grayson, who walked to the witness stand with the dignity of a woman who had graded penmanship for 30 years. The bailiff swore her in, and she opened her leather case like a surgeon laying out instruments. On the large screen behind her, the withdrawal slip appeared magnified 100-fold. "Observe the pressure points," she said, using a laser pointer to trace the smudged signature. The forger applied uneven force, heaviest at the start of each stroke, lightest at the end. This indicates tracing, not natural writing. She clicked to the next slide, Dad's work order from the garage. Compare the rhythm, the same hesitation before the crossbar of the T, the same burr mark from the ballpoint tip. The ink chemistry is identical. This is not coincidence. It is causation. The gallery leaned forward as one. Mrs. Hargrove whispered, "Lord have mercy," loud enough for the row behind her to hear. Mom's face drained of color. Dad's hand, resting on the table, began to tremble in tiny, uncontrollable pulses. Daniel called the bank manager next, who confirmed the missing dual signature requirement. Then, the clinic administrator, who verified the payment but could not produce a separate invoice for egg donation. Each witness built the case brick by brick, the word misappropriation hanging in the air like incense. When Daniel rested, the defense attorney stood smoothing his tie. "Your Honor, this was a family decision made in crisis. The trust language allows for health emergencies." Judge Caldwell cut him off with a raised hand. "I'll decide what the language allows." He lifted the original trust document, the pages crisp, despite their age. "Let the record reflect Exhibit A. Article 7, Section 3. His voice carried to the back row. "Upon any unauthorized distribution of principal, the trustee shall be personally liable for restitution plus interest at the statutory rate, and the corpus shall revert immediately to the named beneficiary." He let the words settle. Mom let out a single wrenching sob that echoed off the rafters. Dad's trembling hand moved to her shoulder, but she shrugged it off. The gallery held its breath, the only sound the scratch of the court reporter's keys. Daniel turned to me, Evie the envelope. I stood legs steady despite the tremor in my chest. The walk to the bench felt endless, every eye tracking the manila envelope now in my hands, the red wax seal gleaming under the lights. I placed it on the judge's desk with both palms as if offering communion. From Grandma June's probate file. Your Honor. Sealed by the clerk until litigation. We request it be opened in open court. Judge Caldwell examined the seal, then the accompanying affidavit from the probate clerk. Objection, he asked the defense. Their attorney half rose. Chain of custody, overruled. The seal is intact. The judge took a small letter opener from his drawer, the blade catching the light. He sliced the wax cleanly, the crack loud in the silence. Papers rustled as he unfolded the contents, a single sheet of June's stationery, her handwriting unmistakable. He began to read aloud, but I was already reaching for the gavel. The wooden hammer hovered midair, suspended between strike and mercy as the first line of Grandma's letter filled the room. I pull the lead-sealed envelope. The air thins like onion skin. The blade sliced through the wax with a crisp snap, and the envelope sighed open like a secret finally allowed to breathe. Judge Caldwell's fingers lifted the single sheet of Grandma June's pale blue stationery, the ink still sharp after all these years. He cleared his throat, and the courtroom leaned forward as one. To the honorable court he read, his voice carrying the weight of a Sunday sermon. If this letter is opened in litigation, it means my trust has been broken. I name my granddaughter Evelyn Marie Caldwell as successor trustee effective immediately upon proof of misappropriation. She is to receive full authority over all remaining assets, including those I have kept private for this purpose. A collective inhale rippled through the gallery. Mom's sob caught in her throat. Dad's trembling hand froze midair. I felt Daniel's grip on my elbow steadying me as the words sank in. Successor trustee. Not Mom. Not Dad. Me. Judge Caldwell continued, eyes scanning the page. An inventory is attached. One modest rental house at 412 Oak Street, purchased in 1998 for income stability. One brokerage account at Edward Jones, seated with life insurance proceeds currently valued at approximately $42,000. And one safe deposit box at First National Key to be delivered separately. He paused, brow furrowing. The key is noted as concealed within the wedding ring setting given to Evelyn on March 15th of this year. Every head swiveled toward me. I reached automatically for the ring on my right hand, the empty gold band that had traveled from Grandma's palm to mine. The prongs were delicate, the setting hollow, but now I understood it was never meant to stay empty. I twisted it off, heart-hammering, and held it to the light. A faint seam glinted along the inner shank, invisible unless you knew to look. Daniel produced a small evidence pouch. I dropped the ring inside and the bailiff carried it to the bench. Judge Caldwell accepted a pair of tweezers from the clerk. With deliberate care, he pried at the seam. A soft click, and a tiny rolled cylinder of gold slid free no longer than a matchstick. Inside was a flat key, brass and old-fashioned, stamped with the number 2, 1, and 7. The gallery exhaled in a single breath. Mom's face went slack. Dad stared as if the key were a loaded gun. The judge set the key on the velvet pad beside the letter. Plaintiff's counsel, you'll coordinate with the bank to open box 217 tomorrow morning 9 o'clock under court supervision. Contents to be inventoried on the record. He turned to the defense table. Given this development, I am ordering immediate full financial disclosure from the defendants. All accounts, all assets, all expenditures traceable to the trust principal. Failure to comply within 72 hours will result in contempt. Their attorney half rose, mouth opening, but the judge's gavel silenced him before a word escaped. Further, the reversion clause is hereby activated. The court finds prima facie evidence of misappropriation. The SUV, titled in Frank Caldwell's name, purchased 48 hours after the unauthorized withdrawal, is now subject to lien. The primary residence at 218 Maple Street, refinanced 6 months ago, will be appraised for equity. Any commingled funds will be clawed back. Dad's hand, no longer trembling, clenched into a fist on the table. Mom's eyes darted to the exit, then to me, pleading and furious at once. The gallery buzzed a low hive of whispers. Rental house. Brokerage. Safe deposit box. Words that meant Grandma June had planned deeper than any of us imagined. Daniel leaned close. We just flipped the board, Evie. They have to open every drawer now. Judge Caldwell folded the letter with care. Tucked inside was a smaller slip. June's handwriting smaller, almost private. He read it aloud, softer now. Mercy with teeth, Evelyn. Restore what was taken, but leave them room to stand again. The house is not the building. It is the promise we keep. He looked at me over his glasses. The court will recess until the safe deposit inventory is complete. Counsel, prepare your witnesses. The gavel fell a single sharp crack that ended the morning. Spectators rose in a rustle of programs and murmured prayers. Pastor Ruth pressed my hand as she passed, eyes shining. Mrs. Hargrove whispered, June always said the Lord keeps better books than any banker. I gathered my notes, the ring now evidence-bagged, and tagged the key gleaming under the clerk's lamp. Mom and Dad were escorted to a side room for the disclosure conference, their attorney trailing like a man walking to his own execution. I was halfway down the aisle when Lily slipped in through a side door. Sunglasses pushed up like a crown face, flushed from the heat or from rage. She blocked my path, voice low enough that only I could hear. You think you've won? You don't know what Mom did with that ring. Her lips curled a snake's smile. Enjoy your little key, trustee. Some doors should stay locked. Lily hisses. You don't know what Mom did with that ring. Lily's hiss clung to me like smoke as I stepped into the marble corridor, the echo of her words louder than the courthouse chatter. Daniel caught my arm before I could turn back. Ignore her. We've got the safe deposit opening at 9 tomorrow. Focus. But the ring, my ring, the empty setting that had cradled Grandma's hidden key, now felt tainted by whatever Lily knew, and I didn't. I slipped the evidence bag with the brass key into my purse and followed Daniel to the parking lot, the August heat pressing down like a judgment of its own. That afternoon, we met at the bank under the watchful eye of a court clerk and a deputy. The safe deposit vault smelled of metal and old paper. Box 217 slid out with a metallic sigh, its contents modest but deliberate. A deed to the Oak Street rental brokerage statements folded neat as church bulletins, and a small velvet pouch. Inside the pouch lay the pawn ticket, crumpled but legible, dated 3 days after Grandma's funeral. The item, 1 gold ring, empty setting, appraised at $800. Loan amount $5,000, dispersed to Marlene Caldwell. My mother's signature, bold and unapologetic, stared up at me. She had hawked the symbol of my future to bridge the gap when the trust money fell short for Lily's final IVF attempt. I felt the floor tilt. Daniel took the ticket, his face unreadable. This changes the timeline. The withdrawal wasn't the only source. The clerk photographed every page, the flash stark against the dim vault. We left with copies sealed in a new envelope, the original locked away for trial. Back at the office, Maya had already pulled the pawn shop's records. The shop owner, a grizzled man named Otis, confirmed Mom had come in alone, tearful but determined. Said it was her mother's ring, needed the cash quick for family medical. I gave her the max. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was sacramental. Grandma's ring. The vessel of intergenerational promise reduced to collateral for a procedure that had nothing to do with me. Daniel's IT expert arrived at dusk, a young woman with purple streaks in her hair and a laptop covered in stickers. She had subpoenaed the email chains from the clinic, the ones authorizing the trust withdrawal. The key email, she said, projecting onto the wall, came from an account registered to Frank Caldwell. But look at the metadata. She zoomed in on the header. Sent from the garage computer at 2:14 a.m. IP address matching Dad's Wi-Fi. The message was terse. Approved for immediate disbursement per family emergency. F. Caldwell. But the typing patterns, the expert explained, showed 2 distinct users. Dad's usual emails were short, misspelled, full of Autoshop jargon. This one was polished, urgent, with Lily's favorite emojis tucked in the signature line. Daniel called Dad that evening, speaker on. "Frank, we have the email. It's from your computer. Explain." Silence, then a heavy sigh. Marlene was beside herself. Lily's last chance, the clinic threatening to cancel. I was at the shop finishing a transmission. Marlene used my laptop. I saw the email after. Told her to delete it, but she said it was done. I let it go to keep peace in the house. His voice cracked. Didn't think it would come to this. Peace. The word tasted like rust. Dad had forged the authorization or stood by while Mom did all to keep the family from fracturing. But the fracture was already there, hairline cracks spreading from the moment they touched Grandma's ring. We confronted Mom the next morning in a deposition room, stenographer clicking away. Daniel laid the pawn ticket on the table like a playing card. Mom's eyes filled, but her chin lifted. I had no choice. The trust transfer was delayed 2 days, bank holiday. The clinic needed full payment, or Lily lost the donor cycle. The ring was just sitting there. Just sitting there, I echoed, voice steady for the first time. It was my wedding, my promise. You pawned my future. She flinched. You were always the strong one, Evie. Lily, she's never had a win. Not the pageant, not the job, not the boyfriend who stayed. One baby, that's all she wanted. One win in her whole life. Tears spilled, real ones this time. I thought you'd understand. You're a nurse. You fix people. Daniel slid the email printout forward. And this, Mom glanced at Dad, who nodded almost imperceptibly. I wrote it. Frank was asleep. I used his computer because the clinic trusted his name on the account. I thought if we paid it back quietly, no one would know. The stenographer's fingers flew. I felt the room shrink, the air thick with the scent of her perfume, and my own rising anger. Mercy with teeth, Grandma had written. This was the bite. Maya's phone buzzed on the table, a soft vibration that cut through the tension. She glanced at the screen, eyes widening. Daniel, the bank, just released the childhood sub-account records. There's a second trust opened when Evie was 5, dormant until now. She turned the phone so we could see. Balance $28,400. Established with birthday checks. Baptism gifts, every dollar Grandma had squirreled away before the wedding fund even existed. My name alone on the title. Untouched. Untraceable until the reversion clause woke it up. Daniel's phone buzzes. Maya stares. There's a childhood sub-account in Evie's name. Maya's phone screen glowed like a small sun in the dim deposition room, the numbers $28 and $400 burning into my retinas. Daniel snatched the device, scrolling through the attached PDF with the speed of a man defusing a bomb. This sub-account, he muttered, was opened the year you turned 5, separate from the wedding fund. Grandma June listed it as a revocable educational trust, but the reversion clause cross-references it. It should have stayed dormant until you claimed it. He zoomed in on the signature block. Look who co-signed as custodian, Frank Caldwell. Dad's face went the color of old ash. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. The stenographer's fingers paused midair, sensing the shift. Daniel's voice hardened. Frank, did you pledge this account as collateral for the garage expansion loan last year? Dad swallowed Adam's apple bobbing. The bank needed security. The wedding fund was locked until Evie married. I thought the sub-account was fair game, just sitting there. I felt the floor drop. The childhood money, every crumpled $5 bill from great-aunts, every savings bond cashed at baptism had been chained to Dad's failing business. A trust violation layered on violation. Daniel was already dialing. Maya, get the loan officer on the line. We need the promissory note. While the call connected, he turned to the defense attorney. You have 72 hours to disclose every lien, every pledge. The judge's order was clear. The loan officer, a nervous man named Pritchard, arrived within the hour. Briefcase clutched like a shield. He laid the documents on the table. The sub-account was listed as collateral for a $25,000 line of credit, drawn down to $18,000 for new hydraulic lifts. Dad's signature, bold and familiar, sat beside the bank stamp. The terms were brutal default, triggered immediate seizure of the pledged asset. Another breach, another claw mark on Grandma's legacy. We recessed to the courthouse at 2 o'clock, the emergency hearing scheduled in Judge Caldwell's chambers. The room was smaller, the air thicker, only the principals and counsel allowed. Lily had finally appeared, hair pulled back. No sunglasses, eyes red-rimmed. She sat between Mom and Dad like a child caught in the middle of a divorce. Daniel laid the new evidence in a neat stack. Your Honor, the defendants pledged a protected trust asset as collateral for a commercial loan in direct violation of the reversion clause. We move for immediate freeze of the line of credit and seizure of the garage equipment to satisfy the lien. The defense attorney sputtered. The sub-account was dormant, no activity for 20 years. Judge Caldwell's gavel cut him off. Dormant does not mean disposable. The trust language is explicit. No encumbrance without beneficiary consent. Miss Caldwell was never informed. He turned to Dad. Mr. Caldwell, did you disclose this pledge to your daughter? Dad's voice was a whisper. No, sir. The judge's pen scratched across an order form. Emergency injunction granted. The line of credit is frozen. The bank will seize the equipment by 5 o'clock tomorrow, unless the balance is paid in full. Further, the court orders forensic accounting of all nonprofit entities associated with the defendants. Daniel slid a final document forward, a printout from the state secretary's website. Your Honor, we've uncovered a 501c3 registered last year as the Grandma June Legacy Foundation. Tax filings show $42,000 in donations, all routed through Lily Caldwell's personal account. The stated purpose, scholarships for single mothers. The reality, the money paid for IVF travel boutique clothing and the SUV lease. Lily shot to her feet. That's a lie, I was building something in Grandma's name. The judge's eyes narrowed. Sit down, Miss Caldwell. The filings list you as sole officer. No board, no oversight, no disbursements to any scholarship recipient. This smells of money laundering through a sham charity. Mom gasped. Dad stared at the table as if it might open and swallow him. The defense attorney flipped through the pages, face paling. Daniel continued, relentless. The nonprofit's bank statements matched the trust withdrawal dates. Every dollar funneled through the foundation was spent on personal expenses. We have receipts. Judge Caldwell's gavel fell again, sharper this time. Contempt of court for failure to disclose material assets. The Grandma June Legacy Foundation is dissolved effective immediately. All accounts frozen. Miss Lily Caldwell will surrender her passport by close of business today. Bailiff escort the defendants to holding for processing. Lily lunged forward, chair scraping. Your Honor, woman to woman, let me speak. Lily's plea hung in the air like a cracked bell, and Judge Caldwell's eyes narrowed over the rim of his glasses. He set the gavel down with deliberate care. Approach the lectern. Miss Caldwell, speak plainly and speak quickly. The bailiff stepped aside and Lily walked forward, heels clicking on the tile hands clasped so tightly her knuckles blanched. Mom reached for her, but Lily shook her off chin high the way she used to before every beauty pageant walk. She gripped the wooden edge of the lectern, voice trembling but audible. Your Honor, I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for truth. She swallowed. The IVF wasn't for me to have a baby. It was surrogacy. Paid surrogacy. $25,000 up front, another $25,000 on delivery. The clinic handled the contract. I was the carrier, not the mother. A low murmur swept the gallery. Pastor Ruth's hand flew to her cross. Daniel's pen stopped mid-note. I felt the room tilt the floor, suddenly unreliable. Lily kept going, words tumbling faster now. Dad found the agency online, said it was a way to help a couple who couldn't conceive, and we needed the money. The garage was behind on rent, the house payment late. He called it a win-win. I'd be useful for once. Dad's head snapped up, mouth opening, but the judge silenced him with a look. Lily's eyes filled, but she didn't blink. I was terrified of being useless. Growing up, every report card, every lost pageant, every job I quit, Mom and Dad would sigh and say, Lily just needs time. Evie got the scholarships, the nursing degree, the steady boyfriend. I got the participation ribbons. When Dad showed me the surrogacy ad, it felt like a lifeline. Carry a baby, save the family. That's what he said. She laughed, a brittle sound. I faked the whole thing, told everyone it was my last chance at motherhood. Posted ultrasound pics from the agency, cried on cue. The praise rolled in. Mom baked me casseroles. Dad bragged at the garage. For the first time, I was the golden child. I kept faking success to keep the praise coming. New clothes, the SUV, the nonprofit. All props in the play. Mom sobbed openly, now shoulders shaking. Dad stared at the table, face carved from stone. Lily's voice cracked. When the agency paid the first installment, I thought we were safe. Then the trust money disappeared into the clinic, and the lies snowballed. I told myself it was borrowing, not stealing. Borrow from Evie, pay back with surrogacy fees. But the couple backed out. Complications. The contract voided. No second payment. We were stuck. Judge Caldwell leaned forward. Elbows on the bench. Miss Caldwell, are you telling this court you committed fraud against a protected trust, falsified a nonprofit, and intended to repay with income from a surrogacy contract that never materialized? Lily nodded, tears tracking her mascara. Yes, sir. I was desperate to matter. The judge's gaze swept the defense table, then settled on me. Miss Evelyn, do you wish to respond? I stood legs steady despite the storm inside. Your Honor, the trust wasn't a piggy bank. It was a promise. Lily's confession doesn't erase the breach. It explains it. But explanation isn't absolution. Judge Caldwell removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Pride is expensive, Miss Caldwell. Stealing costs more. He replaced the glasses and addressed the room. The court finds additional grounds for contempt. Surrogacy income, if any, would be fruit of the poisonous tree. The nonprofit dissolution stands. Bailiff remand Miss Caldwell to custody pending bail review. Lily's knees buckled. The bailiff caught her elbow. Mom wailed, reaching, but Dad pulled her back, his own eyes wet. I felt the weight of every letter I'd mailed, every prayer whispered in hospital chapels. This wasn't victory. It was surgery cutting deep to save the body. Daniel touched my sleeve. Recess. I nodded, throat tight. The judge granted 15 minutes. In the hallway away from the cameras the bailiff had barred, I leaned against the cool wall and closed my eyes. Lily's confession echoed, useless golden child win-win. The family I'd known had been a house of cards and the wind was blowing hard. When we reconvened, I stood before the bench, voice calm. Your Honor, I request recess to propose a deal no one expects. The hallway outside Judge Caldwell's chambers felt colder than the marble deserved the echo of Lily's confession still bouncing off the walls, as Daniel and I huddled with Maya over a legal pad. My request for recess had bought us 24 hours to craft a proposal that would satisfy the court without destroying what was left of my family. Mercy with teeth, Grandma June had written, and I intended to honor every word. We worked through the night, coffee cooling, untouched, the terms taking shape like a blueprint for redemption rather than ruin. By dawn, we had a structured settlement that balanced restitution with rehabilitation. I walked back into court with the document folded in my hand, the ring now redeemed from the pawn shop, with court funds back on my finger. The tiny key no longer hidden, but gleaming in plain sight. Judge Caldwell reconvened the hearing at 9 sharp. The gallery thinner, but no less attentive. Mom sat alone at the defense table, Dad in holding for the equipment seizure, Lily in a separate room awaiting transport. The weight of their absence pressed on my shoulders, but I stood straight. Your Honor. I began, voice steady. The plaintiff proposes the following terms of mercy, enforceable by this court. First, the SUV is to be sold at fair market value within 30 days, proceeds applied directly to the trust principal. Second, Marlene Caldwell will establish and lead a monthly support group at First Baptist titled Boundaries and Blessings, open to any family struggling with financial temptation or enabling behavior. She will attend 12 sessions as participant before leading with Pastor Ruth as co-facilitator. Mom's head snapped up, eyes wide. I continued. Frank Caldwell will volunteer 1 weekend per month with the local Veterans Build program repairing homes for disabled servicemen using the skills from his garage. Hours to be logged and verified. Third, Lily Caldwell will work 20 hours per week at the senior center assisting with meals and activities for a minimum of 2 years. No pay, no shortcuts. Each defendant will sign a consent decree acknowledging the breach and agreeing to random financial audits for 5 years. Daniel stepped forward with the printed agreement. In exchange, plaintiff waives criminal referral and agrees to cap damages at full restitution plus 8% interest. Any future breach triggers immediate asset liquidation into a scholarship fund bearing June Caldwell's name. Judge Caldwell scanned the pages, brow arched. Ambitious. Mrs. Caldwell, do you understand these terms? Mom rose, hands clasped. I do, Your Honor. I'll sign. I need this. Her voice cracked on the last word, but she didn't look away. The judge nodded to the clerk. Bring in Mr. Caldwell and Miss Caldwell separately for signature. While we waited, I addressed the final piece. There's one more asset, Your Honor. The ring on my finger was pawned, then redeemed. Inside the band, Grandma June concealed a second key. I twisted the ring, revealing a hair-thin compartment no one had noticed before. The key inside was smaller silver engraved with a tiny cross. It opens the offering safe, embedded in the front pew of First Baptist installed when the church was built in 1952. Grandma was the only keeper. Pastor Ruth gasped from the gallery. I handed the key to the bailiff. We request court supervision to open it now. Judge Caldwell dispatched a deputy with Ruth to the church. They returned within the hour, the deputy carrying a metal box the size of a shoebox, rusted but intact. Ruth's hands trembled as she placed it on the bench. The lock turned with a soft click, and the lid lifted to reveal a leather-bound ledger and a stack of handwritten pages. The ledger detailed every scholarship Grandma had quietly funded over decades, nursing school for a single mother trade certification, for a laid-off minor college for a foster child. Names, dates, amounts, all in her meticulous script. The estate rules were simpler, written on a single sheet in fountain pen. Upon my passing, the pew-safe contents fund the June Caldwell Scholarship for women entering healing or building professions. Administered by my successor, trustee. Breach of any family trust activates full transfer. The breach clause was underlined twice: liquidation to scholarship, no appeal. Judge Caldwell's voice was quiet. The court adopts the plaintiff's proposal in its entirety. The pew-safe contents establish the scholarship fund immediately. Signatures required today. Mom signed, first pen shaking. Dad escorted in, cuffs signed, next eyes on the floor. Lily brought in last, scrawled her name with a defiance that melted into tears when the judge added, Miss Caldwell, your work at the senior center begins Monday. Transportation will be provided. The gavel fell, sealing the deal. The gallery exhaled. Pastor Ruth approached the bench, eyes shining. June's ledger will change lives, Evie. You've honored her. I reached into my folder and withdrew one final slip, a corner of blue stationery that had fluttered from the ledger unseen. I handed it to the judge. One last unread slip, Grandma's final line. The slip of blue stationery trembled slightly in Judge Caldwell's hand as he unfolded it beneath the courtroom lamp. The gallery had thinned to a handful of diehards, the air heavy with the scent of polished oak and spent adrenaline. I watched his eyes track the single line of Grandma June's script, then lift to meet mine. He cleared his throat, but before he could read aloud, I raised a palm. Your Honor. That note is not part of the evidentiary record. It was tucked privately inside the ledger. May I approach? He nodded, and I walked the aisle with the measured steps of a nurse entering a trauma bay. The paper was warm from his fingers. I took it gently, folded it once, and slipped it into the inner pocket of my blazer right over my heart. This is family business, I said quietly. Not for the transcript. A ripple of surprise crossed the bench. Daniel started to object, then thought better. The defense attorney opened his mouth, closed it. Judge Caldwell studied me for a long moment, the way he might study a witness who had just refused immunity. Miss Caldwell, you are within your rights. The court respects privacy where no legal interest is served. The note remains off record. Relief loosened the knot in my chest. Whatever Grandma had written on that final scrap was meant for me alone. A compass needle pointing true north when the storm cleared. I returned to my seat, the paper a small secret weight against my ribs. The judge adjourned with instructions for the clerk to prepare the consent decree and scholarship charter. Mom was escorted out, first wrists free, but shoulders bowed. Dad followed, cuffs glinting under the fluorescence. Lily shuffled behind a deputy, eyes on the floor, the fight drained out of her. The gavel's echo chased them down the corridor like a verdict they could still feel. Outside, the August heat had broken into a soft evening rain. Reporters clustered under the portico, microphones poised, cameras rolling. A young woman from the local station thrust a mic toward me. Evie, how does it feel to win justice for your grandmother? I paused on the top step, rain misting my hair. This wasn't about winning, I said. It was about keeping a promise. No further comment. I walked past Daniel, shielding me with an umbrella, Maya's hand steady on my elbow. The questions followed us to the parking lot, then faded behind the patter of drops on metal roofs. At home, I locked the door, kicked off my shoes, and sat at the kitchen table with the blue slip between my fingers. The apartment was quiet except for the tick of the wall clock Grandma had given me when I graduated nursing school. I unfolded the paper with the reverence of opening a hymnal to a favorite verse. The ink was faint, the pen pressure light, as if she had written it in the dark. If you're hearing this, choose honest love over easy love. The ring is ready when you are. Hearing this, not reading. My pulse stuttered. I lunged for the evidence box, still on the counter, the cassette tape labeled in her hand. Don't let love become cover-up. I had assumed it was a voice memo for the court, a final testament. But the note said, hearing. I grabbed my ancient Walkman from the junk drawer, the one I'd used for language tapes in college, and popped the cassette in. The wheels turned with a soft whir. Grandma's voice filled the room, thin but unmistakable, the Tennessee lilt I'd fallen asleep to as a child. Evie, if this tape plays, the trust has been tested and you've stood firm. I'm proud, but pride isn't the point. Love that hides rot is no love at all. Honest love names the wound, cleanses it, stitches it closed. Easy love slaps a bandage and calls it healed. Choose honest love even when it costs the people you cherish most. The ring is ready when you are. Fill it with a stone that has seen fire and come out shining. I love you beyond measure. June. The tape clicked off. I sat motionless, tears tracking hot down my cheeks. She had known. Not the details, but the shape of betrayal, the temptation to look away. The cassette was never for the jury. It was for me, a private benediction recorded in the stillness of her final months. I played it again and again until the words were carved into memory. Then I ejected the tape, slipped it into a small velvet pouch, and tucked it beside the blue note in my blazer. Off record, off the public stage, but alive in the place that mattered. The rain had stopped by midnight, the air washed clean. I was brewing chamomile when the workshop bell rang, 3 sharp pulls, the signal Dad had used since I was small to call us in from play. I froze, mug halfway to my lips. No one had rung that bell since the garage foreclosure. I grabbed a flashlight and ran barefoot across the wet grass to the detached shop behind the house on Maple Street, the one the bank hadn't yet padlocked. Dad sat on an overturned crate among stacks of yellowed ledgers, the overhead bulb casting harsh shadows. Grease still stained his fingers, but the cuffs were gone. Bail had been posted. He looked up when the door creaked, eyes red-rimmed. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "Needed to show you before they take it all." He nudged a ledger toward me with his boot. I hid this. The workshop smelled of motor oil and wet concrete, the single bulb swinging slightly from Dad's nudge. I stepped inside barefoot on the cold floor and closed the door behind me. The ledger he pushed forward was thicker than the others, its leather cover cracked and soft from years of handling. "Open it," he said, voice rough as sandpaper. Page 43. I lifted the cover with both hands the way I'd open a patient's chart in the ICU. The entries were in Dad's blocky mechanics script, dates marching down the left margin like soldiers. Starting 2 years ago, small withdrawals from the garage account, 500 here, 300 there, always rounded to even numbers. Opposite each debit was a name and a purpose. Tommy R. prosthetic leg copay. Mrs. Alvarez ramp for wheelchair. Sergeant Lewis deposit on accessible van. Receipts were taped beside every line, hospital bills stamped. Paid contractor invoices marked final. My breath caught. You used the business to help veterans. Dad rubbed the back of his neck, the gesture I remembered from childhood when he'd fixed my bicycle and pretended it was no big deal. Started after Harlan died. Your grandpa was Navy. I figured somebody ought to keep his kind of quiet going. Took the garage profits, what little there were, and routed them through the books so the IRS wouldn't flag charity write-offs I couldn't claim. Called it vanity, but it was cover. Lily was spiraling pageants jobs boys. Marlene kept saying we had to show strength, keep up appearances. I didn't want her to know how thin the ice was. I turned the pages slowly. Over 20 families, $30,000 total, every receipt crisp and dated. The last entry was 6 months ago. Veteran Medical Fund, $2, $800 knee replacement for CPL, Diaz. Beneath it, Dad had written in red, garage closed. Fund ends. I closed the ledger, the weight of it heavier than the metal box from the church pew. Why hide this from me? He looked at the floor. You were the steady one, Evie. Nursing school, hospital, Daniel. I didn't want you thinking we were charity cases. And Lily, if she knew the money was gone, she'd panic. The surrogacy idea came right after the garage folded. I thought one big score could fix everything. Stupid. The rain started again outside, drumming the tin roof like impatient fingers. I set the ledger on the workbench and opened my phone to Daniel. Need you at the shop. Bring the consent decree. He arrived 20 minutes later, tie askew Maya behind him with a portable scanner. Dad repeated the story while Maya photographed every page. Daniel's face softened as the numbers added up. This is verifiable charity, he said. We can petition the court to credit these disbursements against restitution. The veterans' receipts are gold. He called the local VA legal aid office, a contact from pro bono work, and within an hour we had affidavits from 3 recipients confirming the payments notarized and ready. Back at the courthouse the next morning, Judge Caldwell reviewed the new filings in chambers. Mr. Caldwell, these acts do not erase the trust breach, but they demonstrate character. The court will reduce the restitution by the documented $30,000, provided the recipients receive formal acknowledgement and the scholarship fund is informed. Dad nodded, eyes wet. The judge turned to me. Miss Caldwell, any adjustment to the terms? I thought of Grandma's voice on the cassette, honest love over easy love. Credit the verified amounts, Your Honor. And allow Dad's veterans billed hours to count double for the first year. The work is already his penance. The judge made the notation, gavel tapping once. So ordered. Sunday morning dawned clear, the church steeple sharp against a blue sky. I sat in the back pew, the ring on my finger catching the stained glass light. The congregation filled slowly, whispers hushed by the organ prelude. Mom had asked to speak during announcements. Pastor Ruth had agreed. She walked to the pulpit in the same navy dress she'd worn to court, hands clasped to hide the tremble. She began without notes. Many of you know our family has walked through fire this month. I stand here to name my part. I took what was not mine, justified it as love, and nearly lost my daughter. I ask forgiveness from Evie, from this church, and from God. Her voice broke on my name. I will lead boundaries and blessings starting Tuesday. All are welcome. The congregation sat in stunned silence. Then Pastor Ruth stood. Marlene, the Lord delights in repentance. We receive you. A soft amen rippled through the pews. Mom's stepped-down eyes on the floor. The side door opened, and an unexpected guest entered, a man in a wheelchair, mid-40s, wearing a faded Marine's cap. He rolled down the aisle, stopped beside Dad's empty spot, and looked straight at me. Sunday morning, Mom steps to the pulpit to apologize. An unexpected guest enters. The man in the wheelchair rolled to a stop beside the empty space where Dad usually sat, his daughter, a teenager with braces and a shy smile, pushing gently from behind. Pastor Ruth paused mid-prayer, then nodded for them to continue. The congregation turned as one, the rustle of hymnals falling silent. The veteran cleared his throat, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands on the chair arms. Name's Tommy Ruiz, he began. 3 years ago, I came home from Walter Reed missing a leg and most of my hope. Hospital bills stacked higher than my roof. Then Frank Caldwell showed up with a ramp he built himself, no charge, and a check for the copay I couldn't cover. Said a buddy from the VFW told him I needed a hand up, not a handout. He looked toward the back pew where Dad now stood in the doorway, cap in hand. That ramp let my girl get to school without missing the bus. That check kept the lights on. Frank never asked for thanks, just said to pay it forward when I could. The daughter stepped forward, clutching a folded flag in a triangle case. Dad taught me to weld last summer. First thing I made was a mailbox for Mrs. Alvarez down the street. Mr. Caldwell supplied the metal. Her voice cracked. He saved us not with pity, but with work. A murmur of recognition rippled through the pews. Mrs. Hargrove dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Pastor Ruth's smile was soft, approving. Dad's shoulders sagged, not with shame now, but with the weight of being seen for the good he'd hidden. The congregation softened, a collective exhale that didn't erase the wrong, but made room for the man beneath it. Mom rose again, this time without prompting. She walked to the pulpit, knees trembling, but steps sure. Evie, she said, naming me aloud for the first time in weeks. I took your future and called it love. I was wrong. I ask your forgiveness and the forgiveness of everyone here who trusted our family to steward June's legacy. She turned to the congregation. Marlene Caldwell stands accountable. I will lead boundaries and blessings with humility starting Tuesday. Dad joined her at the altar enrollment form for the community college financial literacy course clutched in his grease-stained fingers. I start classes Thursday night, he announced, voice rough. Learning what I should have taught my girls about money and honor. He placed the form on the communion table beside Mom's Bible. Lily entered last, quieter than I'd ever seen her, the SUV keys dangling from a manicured finger. She laid them on the altar without ceremony, the metal clinking against the wood like a bell of surrender. Sold yesterday, she said simply. Proceeds wired to the trust this morning. She met my eyes a flicker of the little sister who once shared secrets under blanket forts. No smirk, no defiance, just the raw edge of beginning again. Pastor Ruth invited me forward. I walked the aisle feeling every gaze, the ring on my finger warm from the morning sun through the windows. At the pulpit, I opened the leather ledger from the pew. Safe its pages now, the founding document of something larger. Today we establish the Grandma June Scholarship, I said. For women entering nursing or the trades funded by the trust reversion, the SUV sale, and every verified act of quiet goodness Frank Caldwell performed. First recipients will be chosen by Christmas. Applications open tomorrow. The congregation responded with a standing ovation, not for me, but for the circle mended. I stepped down as the final hymn began, voices rising in harmony that felt like balm on old wounds. After the benediction, as families filed out for coffee hour, a stranger approached, an older woman in a simple gray dress. Her face lined but eyes bright. She pressed a small card into my hand. On the front, in Grandma June's unmistakable script, "When truth is spoken, set the stone." On the back, a jeweler's address and a date tomorrow at noon. I looked up to thank her, but she was already gone, swallowed by the crowd. Daniel found me in this narthex, a velvet box in his palm. "The stone arrived this morning," he said, voice low. "Colorless sapphire, flawless cut to fit the setting you wore through every hearing." He opened the box. The gem caught the light and threw it back in 1,000 directions. Under the watchful eyes of Pastor Ruth and Mrs. Hargrove, he slipped the ring from my finger, set the sapphire with steady hands, and slid it home. The click was soft, final, the true wedding of trust forged in courtrooms and workshops, and this sanctuary of second chances. We stepped outside into the October light, the church bells beginning their midday chime. I lifted my hand, watching the sapphire fracture the sun into rainbows across the steps. Daniel's fingers laced through mine. The bells pealed on steady and sure, and I knew justice had taught us mature love. I watch light fracture through the stone, hear church bells, and know justice taught us mature love. The sapphire caught the noon bells and threw shards of light across the church steps. Each fracture a reminder that truth once spoken becomes unbreakable. Daniel's hand stayed in mine as we walked to the car, the ring no longer empty but complete its stone set, only after every layer of deception had been peeled away. Behind us, the congregation spilled out in Sunday best voices, softer than before, carrying casseroles and quiet conversations about scholarships and second chances. Mom lingered at the door, helping Mrs. Hargrove with her walker, the first small act of the Boundaries and Blessings group already in motion. Dad shook hands with Tommy Ruiz, promising to weld a new grill for the veterans' picnic. Lily stood apart, phone in hand, texting the senior center to confirm her Monday shift. The family wasn't healed wounds that deep take years, but the bleeding had stopped. If this story of family betrayal, courtroom reckoning, and hard-won mercy moved you, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Thousands of you have shared your own stories in the comments. Mothers who drained college funds for siblings, fathers who hid charity behind pride, sisters who learned humility the hard way. Drop your experience below. Have you ever had to choose honest love over easy love? How did truth change your family? Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear that justice can have teeth and still leave room to stand. Let's keep the conversation going. Your voice might be the sapphire someone else needs to set their own stone.